mellowing out to some Tales of a Thousand Lakes Amorphous here. I'm Pat. Welcome back to Ground Zero Salem. Not listening to the album, we're listening to a sampler here. Death is Just the Beginning. Free compilation. Relapse and Nuclear Blast sampler when they were partners in crime, bedfellows. Pretty sure that's some sick Christian Necrolord wailing art there. This is a mixed bag. You know, there was a lot of evolution going on in brutal music at that time. Case in point, this Amorphous song. I love this album. A lot of people don't. A lot of people swear by it. A lot of people love their whole catalog. I don't go past Tales myself, but the first song's a really good benediction song from Dreams You Dread. I don't know if the rest of the album's that good, but that song bangs. We got Mind Rot on here, Sinister, Cataclysm, Exit 13, Hypocrisy, Doing the Abyss, and then side project of Hypocrisy, The Abyss, have a track on here as well. Divine Eve, Human Remains, Mortician, Gorefest, Disrupt, Enemy Soil. Most of the tracks on here are great. There's a few, like the Pyogenesis song on here is real bad. I don't know if it's like right when they started to suck or it's a couple albums in from when they started to suck, but I don't know the good Pyogenesis stuff even, but I just know the track on here is got some bad Hetfield style Yarbadar kind of vocals. Could do without the Therion song. Just, you know, it's not from their first album, so I don't really care. Meshuggah, never liked any of their stuff ever, even going way back. So, but mostly it's a cool comp. I got it from Residency. The owner was kind enough to do like a home delivery a month or two ago. The days have bled together during all this quarantine stuff, so I can't remember, but I made a small order and he came and dropped it off, which was rad. Got some other cool stuff that I'll talk about in the updates to follow that were part of that. So anyway, we'll be listening to this in the background as I babble about, I'd say recent pickups, but it's actually been a while now, and these pickups are from months ago at this point, and I have a full stack that's almost this size, like waiting to be discussed next. So, you know, time marches on. We are collector scum. We babble. Let's get into it. First up is Conger, Foul Formations. Plenty of people have talked about this already. I don't really know what I could add about it. You know, Ben did a full review. I think the Bark Death. I think Matt talked about it as well. Maybe one or two other people, Eli maybe, but it's just really good, well thought out traditional death metal, full of like these great trend-picked melodies and cool trade-off parts that just kind of bounce back and forth, kind of building tension, hummable riffs, everything I look for in a death metal record, not aping one particular scene or geographic location, anything like that. It's a solo project from Wayne, who was in Decrepitath, Eternal Suffering, Golgotha, tons more. Just one of these renaissance men of death metal, you know, kind of like his sometimes partner in crime, Justin Stubbs. My buddy Mike here in Boston that did Witch Tomb and Impenitent Thief. Like, just one of these people that's just, the creativity is just flowing out of them. They're always recording awesome stuff. Gotta respect the journeymen and the passionate people that just do all this shit on their own a lot of the time. Really cool. Alright, so next up, a YouTube user, commenter that goes by the handle 79 Thanasis, I have it written down, recommended Vomiturition to me. Got two CDs here, they are Russian bootlegs. A Leftover, which is the full length, and Head Tales, the EP, 7-song EP, maxi EP if you will. Yeah, it's Finnish death metal. It's really cool. Homie said that they had some sort of like almost like Swedish melodic elements to it. I can definitely see that. I think he called them Funebra meets Edge of Sanity. That's pretty good. I'd say that's pretty on the money. The full length seems to have more of a leaning towards like that little bit of like rock riffing that Zizma did early on with Yeah, and Disgrace kind of flirted with a little bit, you know. The Finns did that really well. Furball from Sweden also kind of had a little bit of groove in their riff style, and I feel like that's in here too. But yeah, there's some pretty intense melodic passages in it. There's a fair amount of like gloomy bottom end sort of stuff, sort of finished feeling stuff. This is a little bit more straightforward, a little bit more like guttural and heavy, probably leaning a little bit more towards like the convulsed world without God end of things, I'd say. Definitely worthwhile. Thank you for the recommendation. All right, from Quebec, I'm pretty sure. Saccage Vorace, probably pronounced that wrong. So Kevin talks about these guys a lot. Full Metal Ginger. Eric has mentioned them before. I knew that they were sort of like kind of a DB-driven, motor-charged, but very metallic kind of crust band. And I was right. Very, very fucking catchy, good shit. It's got enough like metal professionalism to it and heaviness to it and like kind of like guttural vocal style where I think it would appeal to metalheads just as much, if not more, than punks, but I think everybody could probably get into it. Very catchy, awesome, heavy crust stuff. This is a 4-song EP with a couple of bonus tracks tacked on. Maybe it was originally a 7-inch, I'm not sure. 2 bonus tracks and 3 live tracks that sound really good, almost sound like studio quality, so you're getting pretty much an album's worth of stuff with this, and it's highly recommended. Next up is Coalesce, Revolution in Just Listening. So Coalesce is one of these bands. It's kind of funny because as I've gotten older, I'm going back and checking out all this 90s hardcore that I wasn't interested in at the time. You know, like as somebody that was in his late 30s, early 40s, I got into Overcast. I never really cared about them that much when they were around. Same thing as a lot of other bands that I've been checking out lately. I bought a Resurrection double LP, a band that I saw live all the time as a kid, the hardcore Resurrection, not the from Jersey, not the death metal one from Florida. At the time, I was looking for stuff that was a lot faster, like Circle Pit inducing in one way or another, and this sort of like heavier, you know, kind of sledgehammer, slow, thudding kind of hardcore shit I wasn't really feeling so much. My one exception was Dead Guy. I always liked them. But this was part of that sort of noisy hardcore revolution that started happening in the mid to late 90s when Converge started getting big, Botch, these guys. Dead Guy was a little bit before all that and kind of helped kick it off, I want to say. So I'm just kind of like exploring a lot of that stuff now. And like an adjacent thing was I got really into all that like kind of Gravity Records, screamy hardcore stuff that kind of went along with that, but was slightly a different scene, I guess. At any rate, I picked up this Coalesce record. This was the one they did on Relapse. I don't know if like their earlier stuff was a little bit more raw before they made it on a big metal label or not, but this is really good. I expected more of like a noisy, kind of angular, emotional and mental breakdown-esque kind of thing, not unlike Botch or Dead Guy. And there's a lot of that on here, but there's a lot of this like real riffing, like real riffy-ass riffing, with like almost like 70s rock kind of noodling qualities to it, almost kind of jazzy. Very heavy, angry vocals, very brutal, about as brutal as it gets without them becoming death metal vocals. They still sound like a person, you know, that kind of angry gym teacher thing going on. Super cool record. It's got spot gloss on the CD, if you can tell. That's nice. Came out on Relapse, I don't know when. Remember when it came out. It was like 98 or something like that, I think. 99 maybe. Used to own this. I saw it in distro for like $2. Figured I'd pick it up. Autophobia, Malignant. Came out on Slap a Ham kind of around the same time, I want to say. Like maybe a little bit later. 99, 2001, through there in that time period. Yeah, this is grind-ish kind of power violence stuff, fastcore, somewhere in there. You know, fast, angry, short songs, just enough of a little bit of like a growly metal thing going on, but still very fucking punk. Some good, like you do with this type of stuff, there's a lot of like funny song titles. The Huddled Masses Can Suck Our Asses is probably the best one on here. Hungry, Hungry Hypocrites. Hardcore Kids Have the Coolest Tattoos. Lunar Positions and the New Age Escapists. These guys were from Pennsylvania. I want to say Pittsburgh, but it could have been Philly. You know, nothing too like knock your socks on your ass impressive about this, but it's also not terrible either. It's perfectly enjoyable listen if you're in the mood for some like faster, grindy, hardcore kind of stuff. I also picked up this Jesuit discography CD. This was also kind of like noisy hardcore stuff. A band from, I can't remember off the top of my head, I think Virginia at the time. Members of Converge, one or two, I think, ended up in this band. Again, very like kind of noisy, falling apart, screamy kind of hardcore stuff. And I haven't really spent much time with this, to be honest. Oh, but my friend Ryan from Hex Records has a blurb where he talks about this, so that's cool. Yeah, I've often thought of them along the lines of the Eucharist, the hardcore Eucharist from Alto, Virginia, I think, and I don't know, like Jihad and Nama and bands like that. What I actually got when I spun this once or twice was stuff that was a little bit less like metallic and evil sounding. It was a little bit more like kind of straightforward, screamo-ish kind of stuff. Screamo of the day, not whatever it's considered now. So, yeah, I don't know. I haven't really been in the mood for this, but I'll certainly go back to it when I am feeling an urge to listen to that kind of hardcore stuff. Like cool cover art there. Now we got the Stench of Decay discography. Finnish band I talked about recently when I was talking about all that stuff that got me listening to death metal again. Goes back to 2005. This came out in 2012. Not sure when they stopped recording or called it a day, but it's all late 2000 stuff. And like I said, it's just good meat and potatoes Finnish death metal. It's a cool looking layout there. They do an Abhorrence cover. That should tell you where their influences lie. You know, pretty gloomy and cryptic sounding, but also like some very crisp recording techniques throughout their various recordings on here that kind of stick with you a little bit better, I feel like. And the drums are also like very crisp and like forward sounding on at least one of these, almost kind of clicky, but not intolerably so. Good shit. Deceased. Blueprints of Madness originally came out on Relapse, and this is on Thrash Corner Records. So this is after Luck of the Corpse, the second album after Luck of the Corpse, I believe. And already, you know, you can tell King and the boys are trying to do more of an epic thing, trying to tell some stories, you know, get the real horror inspired shit going. And I think it's good. There's some great sharp ass riffs on here. The vocals are still like more brutal, like traditional death metal style than what they become. Kind of bounce back and forth between a growl and like a shriek. Almost reminds me of Macabre in that way. But the songwriting and the kind of the songcraft and composition of it hadn't quite gotten to where they would get on like Supernatural Addiction and Fearless Undead Machines, which are two incredible records. Kind of feels like a little bit wandering and meandering and almost kind of aimless sometimes, but also still very good. I feel like they just had an idea of where they were going and hadn't quite gotten there yet with this one. Unnatural, this is Ken of Ken's Death Metal Crypt. Excellent YouTube channel. His band, he sent me a couple of CDs. This is an EP that came out on Horror, Pain, Gore, Death, Path to Ruin, and then he threw together a bunch of like demos and splits and stuff on this for me. Very kind of him. There was a split with Unnatural and Rotted and Fetid Zombie on here, and some other stuff as well. There's a lot of good new bands coming out. Like lately, the whole quote-unquote caveman thing is the hot, heavily memed, you know, death metal style. And there's some younger bands that do it pretty well. You know, there's some really enjoyable, fun bands on like Maggot Stomp. You know, everybody knows about that shit. But there's just something to be said for, you know, people that have been around the block and have been into the genre since its inception, and them doing something not all too different and just completely kicking ass at it. You know, this is straightforward, no bullshit death metal. You know, certainly if you like Mortician and Cyanide, Rotrevor, etc., this is up your alley. Super guttural, you know, not hyper blasting, you know, very significantly fucking heavy riffs, not trying to rewrite any kind of history or reinvent any wheels or anything like that, but just real deal fucking great brutal death metal. So scope that shit out, support Ken and all of his endeavors. A couple of holes I had to fill here. Tiamat, we got Clouds and the Astral Sleep. Astral Sleep, second full length, Clouds the third. This is as far as I've gone with them. I haven't heard Wild Honey even. I had this in high school. I had Clouds and I loved it. I was super into Paradise Lost, My Dying Bride, and other kinds of mellower doom metal. And this is not doom metal, but this kind of fit along with it mentally with me at the time. And then Astral Sleep, which kind of fills a big hole because I've had Sumerian Cry and the Treblinka stuff for like a considerable amount of time. I'm well familiar with them. And I'd heard this growing up, but I hadn't heard this one. So I picked these up at the same time, just about. And it's just something about like the warmth almost of the riffing style. It's super melodic. You know, these guys were from Sweden. You could call them black metal. I think if they were from Greece or if they were from Switzerland, they would be considered a black metal band. And they definitely have a lot more in common, just as far as like their musical approach to Greek bands, the Hellenic bands, and like say Samael than any band from Scandinavia. Just these big, airy, but kind of dreadful sort of riffs, just the kind of like mystical keyboards and stuff. It gets real, almost like sort of like new agey in a weird way on this one. I really like Tiamat's stuff a lot. Just, you know, the Winter Shadow, especially Ancient Entity, those songs go way back, but those ones always hit me real hard. This includes the Sleeping Beauty EP, which is a live EP from Israel, I believe, which was released separately. It's just bonus tracks on here, but it's nice having live bonus tracks that actually sound good. Then another one that I picked up in high school and hated at the time, Draconian Times by Paradise Lost. I don't hate it now. It's still probably my least favorite Paradise Lost that I own at this stage. I mean, I'll always be a gothic stan, a gothic fanboy, you know. But I remember picking this up, and I thought this was the new one. I had the As I Die EP, and I missed Shades of God somehow. Didn't know it was a thing at all, because, you know, at the time, I could only go by what I saw in the racks in the stores, and I was like, oh, there's a new Paradise Lost. So the last one I heard was the As I Die EP, which was just an EP, and the one before that I heard was Gothic. And I wasn't expecting this, which was, you know, this almost kind of like Yorkshire goth, kind of tinged like Metallica sound. You know, very, very Hetfieldy kind of vocals. Definitely like super straightforward metal, but with like a kind of a gloomy atmosphere to it. I didn't get it at all at the time. I did not like it. I listened to it at work. I'm like, yeah, there are some tracks on this. There's some really good songs, but god damn, is this thing long? You know, I think a little brevity probably would have benefited these guys at the time. But I get it. You know, they're a doom metal band at the end of the day. Even the song lengths aren't crazy. It's just there's 12 songs on it, and some of them are kind of on the longer side. But yeah, nice going back to it. Like it way more than I did when I was a kid, but still not my favorite. It's Music for Nations, and for the record, those Tiamats were Century Media, if you didn't know, which you should. My Dying Bride, the new one, The Ghost of Orion. Need to spend more time with this, admittedly. It's going back, you know, I think both Paradise Lost and My Dying Bride have like kind of returned to the styles that got them big in the first place, that got them the attention in the first place. Although I guess the new Paradise Lost is a little bit more like straight up goth. I listened to a track from it. I liked it, but it definitely sounded like something off of Cleopatra Records in the mid-90s. Like it sounded like Rosetta Stone or something. Maybe that's just that track for them and they have more metal songs, but kind of an interesting swerve. That Medusa record I thought was great. But at any rate, their country mates My Dying Bride, what I'm talking about now, This is cool. It seems like a little bit more of a streamlined version of what they did on their big records. You know, Turn Loose the Swans and the Angel in the Dark River. It's a little bit more like the growly vocals aren't quite as growly, and that's probably indebted to the fact that the singer can't growl like that anymore. But it's a little bit more palatable. The songs are a little shorter. You know, it's still miserable, kind of deathy doom stuff. A little bit more compact. I enjoyed it for what it was, but like I said, I need to spend a little bit more time with it. Haven't really been in the mood for doom as much. You know, the sun's shining, it's nice out. Teenagers are running around in the streets with no masks on. Switch things up a little bit here. We got Cras, Best Before '84. Another one that I had back in the day as a kid, and I was just like, what is this? Because if you haven't heard Cras, super influential punk band, anarchist people that lived on a commune and did legit things to like mess with their country's government at the time, pulled pranks and all kinds of interesting to read about Cras. Kind of a household name for punk, but in case you have been living under a rock, they were a big deal. This is a cool compilation of like singles and stuff up until 1984. Best Before '84 is what it's called. Comes with this really cool, big, thick booklet. And I had this as a teenager. I'd seen Cras t-shirts and Thrasher, I think. I had some copies of Maximum Rock and Roll, and they were mentioned in that. Even Christian Slater is wearing a jacket that says Cras on the back in Gleaming the Cube, I believe. So when I heard it, I was expecting Discharge or The Exploited or something like that. And you get this like noisy, like somewhat feedback drenched, like very trebly, staticky kind of like practice amp guitar, grating as hell over like marching beats and just like a dude just fucking yelling about politics. And it took a while. I still am not a big fan of much past their first album, The Feeding the 5,000, but some of what they did, I mean, a lot of what they did was very impactful, and a lot of their music is a pretty enjoyable listen, but it's not immediately satisfying. It's something that you have to kind of absorb. But I do really like this stuff. This is a good compilation of like odds and ends. 2-disc compilation there. And there's a poem on here. That's the thing. They were really into poetry and multimedia stuff with like movies when they played live and shit. There's a poem on here called The Reality Asylum, where you can just Google or look up the poem, but it's a very heavy poem about religion and the nuclear bomb and war and all this other shit. And I was at work listening to this on headphones, playing Blades on my phone, the Elder Scrolls app game. I'm playing Blades and killing goblins and chewing on Nicorette gum, you know, because I quit smoking recently. I'm off the gum now, but I'm chewing Nicorette and drinking cold brew and listening to this poem, and I realized that like I was way too like gacked out of my mind on just like caffeine and nicotine that it was in the gum, that I felt like I was gonna have a fucking panic attack from listening to this intense like anarcho-punk poem about nuclear war and fucking, you know, the corruption of religion. It was real heavy. So now that story time with Pat is over, we got Loud Blast, Disincarnate, first full length from this French death metal band. I'm familiar with Sublime Dementia, which is the second one by these guys. That one's really good. It's super like technical and imaginative. This is still pretty, you know, pretty full of twists and turns. Yet another one where Europeans hopped on a plane to be produced by Scott Burns. These guys and Cancer, and probably a few more that I don't know about. Definitely has that early 90s Scott Burns sound to it. Sounds good, you know, a little bit compressed, like a lot of that early stuff that he did, but it's good, solid, like early 90s death metal. Touches of like thrash influence still in it. Definitely for people that like, I'd say more Floridian stuff than anything else in terms of sound. But, you know, quality shit, good riffs. I do recommend the second one, Sublime Dementia, over this, though. That record's fantastic. Then we got Killing Joke, the Peel Sessions. So, I know I just took time to explain who Cras was, and I don't know if that was necessary. Killing Joke's another like household name as far as punk goes. It's also it's funny to me to think of like how the term post-punk started existing for bands in like 1978 when punk's inception was supposed to be like 76, 77. Like it all happened so quickly, you know. But if you don't know Killing Joke, man, check out some Killing Joke. Massively influential on everybody from Godflesh and Napalm Death to like industrial music in general. I feel like Killing Joke's influence is what made industrial music like music in the 80s and 90s, you know, taking it from Throbbing Gristle and bands like that who were like dropping shit downstairs and recording it and putting it in loops or whatever. Not to minimize the influence of Throbbing Gristle, but it was very noisy. You know, these guys had like a mechanical sound, but they played instruments and stuff, and they had this very like, you know, machine-like quality to the music that they wrote, which was really cool. And these are all Peel sessions, and they're all really well recorded, great sounding Peel sessions. Yeah, I go way back with these guys. I mean, obviously, a lot of people from my age group probably remember getting the Garage Days revisited EP. Metallica does The Weight by Killing Joke on this, which is off their first album, the self-titled one. And they do have like a weirdly, it's odd to call it metallic because it's not like, you know, we're not talking about Iron Maiden here, but like a heavier, abrasive guitar tone that I feel like a lot of post-punk bands and punk bands didn't have. Kind of a little bit more deliberately processed or inhuman sounding. I don't know. Tribal-y drum patterns, really cool shit, you know, influential on everybody. The anarcho-punk scene, industrial music, prong, big time, Godflesh, you know, cool, cold, minimalist, just dark fucking music. Great. Samael, Ceremony of Opposites and Rebellion. Yet another one, repurchasing from high school. Yeah, I had Ceremony of Opposites back in the day. It was the only one I had. I didn't hear the debut and the sophomore record until way later. Blood Ritual and Worship Hymn, of course. And I loved this record. I'm not sure why I got rid of it initially, you know. Just something about the riffs are so, like, just tension-inducing. The riffs in this are so dynamic. It's so fucking good, so memorable. You know, it's got this weird approach to black metal that only this band had, and I feel like they kind of perfected on this one. Just immediately enjoyable. You'll remember the songs after listening to it. It's fucking great. Swiss black metal stuff. Now we have The Decaying Light by Dissin Tomb, which was recommended to me by Devin, Maze of Torment. And he pitched it to me like, okay, imagine, you know, a band like Incantation, you know, kind of like 90s style, like meandering, labyrinthine, cavernous, whatever, that style of death metal, but with like a lot of brutal, like modern brutal death metal kind of flair to it. Almost like kind of slammy parts. And I was like, that sounds really interesting. And that's essentially what this is. Again, brevity, people. Look how many songs are on this. Listen to all that, but like up until about halfway through, you know, I was really enjoying it. You know, I had it playing in the background at work and it just kind of jamming out to it. Like, it's produced perfectly, like the squeakiest, cleanest production for very brutal, very murky death metal, you know, tuned up snares and, you know, like almost kind of slammy parts, but all these like kind of serpentine riffs and stuff all over it. It's cool. Dissin Tomb, yeah. I'm not mad at it. I like it. Then we got Taste of Fear, self-titled, full-length. This came out on Lost and Found, which was a sketchy hardcore label that ripped off a lot of bands. This was a legit release, I believe. This was Daryl Kahan from Disma, Funebrarum, Abizagarath, Citizen's Arrest, Forced Expression. I think that's almost everything the guy's been in. Another journeyman. He's played in a shit ton of bands. Passionate musician. This is, I think, right when Daryl started to like branch out more into death metal. I have some other Taste of Fear stuff that's a little bit more grindcore, a little bit more crust. This is almost a straight up death metal record. Relatively straightforward, kind of like chunky, chuggy kind of stuff going on. Don't really know who to compare it to. There's still a little bit of a hardcore bent. Very brutal. It's over pretty quick. The songs are pretty short. I like it a lot. I know that this is probably a legit thing. Lost and Found had this horrible reputation of like taking people's stuff without their permission and releasing all these weird bootlegs, but I did meet Daryl once, and I asked him about the Citizen's Arrest discography, and asked him if it was a bootleg, and he was like, no, that was a legit thing. So I think he was working with him on this as well. At any rate, I got this for like $2 on Discogs, and it's fucking awesome. And nobody talks about this band, and people should, especially if you appreciate the man's stuff that he's done in the metal scene or the hardcore scene. This seems to be kind of floating in between. Forced Expression was really cool too. That was more like sort of power violence leaning. And then this is the Bad Pyogenesis song. Oh, so bad. Asbestos, to the memory of the war victim. Discography, Japanese crust band. Just super good. I mean, I had a dub of this for ages. I think I actually played it in a video couple updates back. Had Gizm on one side and Asbestos on the other. Straight up raging crust punk. A little bit too tight to be considered like, straightforward punk. There's kind of gruffer kind of vocals to it. It's got a little bit of that tight picking. There's not really anything like overtly too metal about it. It's just straight up kind of raging kind of shit. Despite the logo, how that looks, it doesn't sound like Amoebix. It's kind of Amoebix font, but not Amoebix music. Almost like a touch of like a little bit of touch of like thrash or speed metal. I find that Japanese bands do that so well, just weaving in enough of that, like whether it's triple picking or palm muting into their punk repertoire. It almost sounds like just like so naturally woven in that it's just like, yeah, that's still totally punk, even though that dude's completely shredding his guitar. Came out on Tribal War Asia quite a while ago. I've been wanting this for so long. I finally found it for like $5. That's it. I gotta use the men's room. How about that? All of you have a good night, and I will see you on the stream later. Hey, don't say anything racist, because that sucks. Bye.